In 2022, Louise Perry published The Case Against the Sexual Revolution. When I first read it, I disagreed with much of it and believed that the sexual revolution was largely a positive development. Now, I find myself agreeing with many of Perry's conclusions, although I strongly dislike the book's implicit misandry and feminist bias. Perry argues that the sexual revolution and the idea of female sexual liberation did not actually empower women. Having had multiple casual sexual encounters myself, I don't view this as empowering. I find it emotionally unfulfilling and draining. Marriage and long-term commitment, in my view, are far more beneficial for women than flippant, meaningless sex. In the final chapter, Perry praises marriage as a positive institution for both men and women, particularly for raising families. I agree. However, the irony, which Perry herself acknowledges, is that feminism was historically founded on anti-marriage and anti-family worldview. Radical second-wave feminists like Andrea Dworkin, Kate Millett, and Germaine Greer openly called for the abolition of marriage. Perry also notes that the feminists most hostile to marriage never had children. So while I agree with Perry's defense of marriage, I find it contradictory that she still identifies as a feminist, given feminism's long history of hostility towards marriage and family life. Even English feminist Julie Bindel, whom Perry thanks in the acknowledgements, has explicitly stated that marriage can never be feminist. Marriage requires sacrifice, compromise, and commitment. I don't see how a worldview that frames men as inherent oppressors and women as perpetual victims can coexist with a stable, healthy marriage. It's no coincidence that many modern men are opting out of marriage altogether. Feminism has made the institution increasingly unattractive. Perry's book is saturated with feminist framing. On pages 84 and 85, she presents 4 questions meant to assess women's sociosexuality. If you answer yes to any of them, she claims you are justified in feeling angry at a sexual culture that set you up to fail. This perfectly encapsulates feminism. Women are encouraged to see themselves as oppressed victims of society. Rather than promoting agency and responsibility, feminism positions women as fragile and powerless, while shifting blame outward, usually towards men or the patriarchy. Instead of encouraging women to set boundaries and take responsibility for their sexual choices, Perry's feminist lens insists that men must change their behavior and suppress their desires to accommodate women. That is deeply sexist. It places the burden of moral responsibility almost entirely on men. If you're interested in a space online that supports women without the feminism, then check out the subreddit Women's Advocates. Link is in the description below. Now, I obviously agree that men should not engage in predatory behavior, but even Perry admits that most men are not violent or abusive. On page 39, she states that roughly 10% of men exhibit predatory or violent tendencies. That means 90% of men do not. Statistically speaking, 9 out of 10 men you meet are not dangerous. Violent men exist, but they do not represent the majority. And women are not uniquely non-violent either. While rape is more commonly committed by men, domestic violence is committed at similar rates by women. Erin Pidsey, who founded the world's first domestic abuse shelter, pointed this out and was promptly attacked by feminists for contradicting the narrative. Lesbians also experience the highest rates of domestic violence and divorce compared to heterosexual couples. On page 106, Perry claims there is a darkness within human sexuality, mostly but not exclusively within men. She then discusses BDSM and 50 Shades of Grey. 50 Shades is a terrible book that portrays kink and relationships in a dangerous way. It is not representative of BDSM culture. Anyone with real experience in kink knows it is built on communication, consent, and trust, not abuse. Christian Grey is not a healthy depiction of a dominant partner. Yet on page 118, Perry describes BDSM as a ritualized and newly legitimized version of a toxic dynamic. This is blatant kink shaming. She uses an extreme and inaccurate example to condemn an entire sexual subculture, much of which exists within loving, committed relationships. Perry also constantly criticizes male sexuality, especially male promiscuity, while failing to apply the same scrutiny to women. She seems unable to accept that women, like men, can have dark or aggressive sexual fantasies. Women are the primary consumers and authors of romance fiction. I'm a romance author myself, and the genre is full of tropes like bad boys, bully romance, alpha males, mafia romance, and dark romance. The darker sides of sexuality are not male exclusive. Feminism's refusal to acknowledge this undermines women's agency and honesty about desire. In chapter 6, Perry notes that many women enjoy being sexually dominated. Rather than viewing these women as consenting adults making autonomous choices, she frames this as troubling and subtly shifts blame back onto men, as feminism so often does. Perry also argues that sexual repression is a virtue, especially for men. This is a baffling stance. Freud identified repression as an unhealthy defense mechanism, one that often causes desires to intensify rather than disappear. Perry argues that men should repress their sexual impulses to accommodate women, despite the fact that monogamy already requires men to restrain their baser instincts. Repression doesn't make people healthier, it makes them unstable. Incels are a prime example. Elliot Rodger's frustration was driven by extreme sexual frustration and resentment. A far healthier approach is sublimation, redirecting unmet desires into productive outlets like sport, art, or work. Many athletes channel aggression into performance. Freud even theorized that sex and aggression are closely linked. Suppressing these drives entirely is not healthy. Perry does raise valid concerns about pornography's impact on young men and about exploitative sex work. However, I hold a liberal view here. Adults should be free to make private choices, even risky ones. Alcohol kills people every year. I've had my own struggles with alcohol, yet we don't ban it, we regulate it. So why do feminists push to ban sex work while fiercely defending abortion? Both can harm women. Feminists argue my body, my choice for abortion, yet deny that same principle to sex workers, including women who willingly choose that profession. Many arguments Perry makes against sex work can be applied to abortion, coercion, trauma, and harm to vulnerable women. Yet the feminist solution was not to ban abortion, but to legalize and regulate it for safety. Why not apply the same logic to prostitution, as countries like New Zealand and the Netherlands have done? Feminists place abortion and voluntary sex work into the same category, but they don't do this with abortion. That's a clear double standard. Overall, the case against the sexual revolution is an interesting and worthwhile read. Perry raises important questions, but the feminist bias and persistent anti-male framing made me deeply disagree with this book. For a more honest critique of feminism, I recommend The Flip Side of Feminism by Suzanne Venker and Sex Matters by Mona Charen. They make similar cultural critiques without the feminist baggage. My novel Tic-Tac-Toe also explores these themes, depicting a dystopian society where men are second-class citizens. You can check that out in the trailer in the cards or in the description. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more content.